hadn't worn that dress in years. It hung quietly at the far end of my wardrobe, untouched, unworn, wrapped in a faded plastic cover that had yellowed with time. A deep navy blue, soft to the touch, it fit me just right, clinging in all the right places and letting go where it should. I had bought it once, long ago, to feel beautiful again. But it never quite had the occasion it deserved. Until today. My son, my Ethan, was coming home. Not the little boy I had rocked to sleep, soothed through nightmares, taught to ride a bike and drive a car. He was returning a man. Soldier. And I wanted to meet him as more than just the caretaker he had always known. I wanted to feel alive in his presence, not just out of joy, but because something inside me had been waiting, aching really, for the fullness of life to return to this house. I slid into the dress with slow care, ran my fingers down the smooth line of fabric, then stepped into my heels, a touch too tall for comfort. But I didn't care. I curled my hair the way I used to when I still believed in romance, swiped a bold lip color across my mouth, and lingered a little too long in the mirror, studying the lines that had deepened since he'd left. 41. Still a woman. Over. The kitchen was already filled with the comforting aroma of his favorite meal. Chicken stew with thyme and roasted potatoes, the way he liked it as a boy. I'd laid out his favorite dessert too, even though he always claimed not to have a sweet tooth. I wanted everything to be perfect. I heard the car pull up before I saw him. My heart jumped so fiercely it almost hurt. I wiped my hands on the towel and moved toward the door, half laughing, half breathless. And then he was there, standing tall in the doorway. His uniform crisp but softened by the weight of the road. His frame filled the space. Broad, strong, sure in a way that startled me. His jaw was more defined, his shoulders straighter. His eyes, though, those were the same. Brown, familiar and warm. But even they held something deeper now. Something quieter. For a moment neither of us spoke. He looked at me. Not the way a boy looks at his mother, not quite. There was something hesitant in his eyes, as though he were piecing together a memory. Something about me that had changed. Or maybe something about him that now saw me differently. "Mom," he finally said. His voice lower than I remembered. I smiled, blinking back the rush of tears. "Welcome home, sweetheart." He stepped forward, and his arms wrapped around me before I could even finish the sentence. I melted into him, that familiar protective scent of him, now tinged with something mature, something foreign, washing over me. His body was hard where it used to be soft. His embrace full of control and restraint. He pulled back just enough to look at me. His eyes flicking over my face, down to the dress, then back again. "You look amazing." I felt my cheeks flush and laughed lightly, waving him off. "It's just an old dress. You didn't used to wear heels," he added, his tone teasing, but his gaze didn't wander far from mine. "Well, you weren't this tall before," I replied, nudging his arm. I had to catch up. Dinner was quiet at first. He ate slowly, his fork tracing deliberate patterns in the stew. Every so often, his eyes would lift to me and linger. We spoke of safe things. His training, his comrades, the weather. But the air between us had changed. There was a heat to it. Not overt, not wrong, but present. He looked like a man I might pass on the street and feel drawn to. Someone whose presence unsettled something long dormant in me. And I realized I saw him, not just as my son, but as a man. And God help me, he saw me too. That first night, after the dishes were done and the conversation had gently faded into comfortable silence, I found myself standing by the window, watching the moonlight spill across the lawn. Ethan was in the living room, flipping through the old photo album I had left out on the coffee table, half on purpose. He loved nostalgia. I had hoped it might anchor him here again, if only for a while. "Mom," he called, his voice softer now, without the edge it sometimes carried in uniform. "Did you know you kept this one?" I turned to find him holding up a photo of us. Him at maybe 9 years old, standing crookedly in a Halloween costume. His arm around my waist. His head tilted into my side. I was smiling in the picture. Tired, yes, but content. I couldn't throw that away, I said, walking back toward the couch. You were obsessed with that costume for months. He smiled down at it, then shifted over, making room for me beside him. When I sat down, I was suddenly aware of the closeness. Our shoulders touched. His warmth, familiar but changed, radiated through the thin fabric of my dress. You always looked so happy back then, he murmured. I hesitated. It was a good time. You were still little. You needed me then. He didn't reply immediately. His gaze stayed on the picture, but his voice lowered with an edge of something unspoken. I still do. The words caught something in my throat. I turned to look at him, but he wasn't looking at me anymore. He leaned forward, set the photo album aside, then leaned back again, sighing like he was letting go of something heavy. Being away, he said slowly. It makes you think about everything differently. What you have, what you don't. I saw a lot of people come and go. A lot of men who had wives, girlfriends. Some who didn't. And you learn to live without softness. Softness. That word struck me. 'Cause that was exactly what I missed too. Not just affection, not just touch, but the presence of someone who looked at you with intent. With care. I swallowed, my hand resting on my knee, suddenly unsure of what to say. I missed it too, I whispered before I could stop myself. Having someone around. Someone who sees you. He turned his head. His eyes searched mine in the quiet. Yeah, he said, his voice just above a breath. Exactly. There was no rush to fill the silence after that. We just sat there side by side, letting the clock tick and the house settle around us. When I stood to say goodnight, he reached out. Not abruptly, just a soft touch to my hand, his thumb brushing my wrist. I'm glad you wore the dress, he said. And I smiled, even as my heart stuttered. I'm glad you came home. That night, lying in bed, I couldn't sleep. I replayed his words, his look, the way he moved through the house now like a man. Purposeful, poised, yet gentle. Ethan had always been thoughtful, even as a boy. But now there was something refined in the way he carried himself. He moved with a quiet confidence, the kind you don't get from charm or arrogance, but from surviving something hard and coming out intact. He didn't just need me anymore. He chose to be near me. And something inside me, something I had kept dormant for years, flickered to life in that realization. Not because I mistook love for dependence, but because two lonely people had found themselves back under one roof, older, changed, aware. And we were seeing each other not just through memory but through longing. Longing for warmth. Longing for closeness. Longing for something neither of us had spoken aloud. Not yet. It started with the breakfast. I woke to the scent of fresh rosemary and garlic, a hint of something warm and decadent wafting from the kitchen. I padded down the hallway barefoot, still in my robe, thinking perhaps he was just heating up leftovers. But when I turned the corner, I saw Ethan at the stove, shirt slightly damp from the steam, sleeves rolled up to the elbow. He looked over his shoulder and smiled. "Good morning," he said, voice a little hoarse from sleep. "Sit down. I'm making that frittata you used to order when we went to that bistro downtown. Thought you deserved something better than cereal." I blinked, startled by the gesture. The table was already set. Properly. Forks in the right place, glasses of fresh squeezed juice, cloth napkins. And in the center, a little glass jar held a single wildflower, delicate and yellow. "You remembered the frittata?" I asked, sliding into a chair. "I remember everything," he said. And the way he looked at me when he said it, calm, sure, watching me with that slow, thoughtful gaze, it made something flutter inside me I hadn't felt in years. Later that day, a small box appeared on my vanity. No note, no explanation. Just a cream-colored ribbon tied neatly over the lid. Inside was a bottle of perfume. My perfume. The one I had stopped wearing years ago because it felt too indulgent. I found him on the porch, pretending not to wait for my reaction. "You've been sneaking around," I said lightly, holding the box up. He chuckled, not denying it. "I noticed the bottle in your cabinet was almost empty. Thought you might like a new one." His thoughtfulness unnerved me in the most wonderful way. That night, he made dinner again. Steak with roasted shallots, a salad with shaved fennel, and a bottle of red wine he claimed he bought just for this. He poured it slowly, carefully, and when he handed me my glass, his fingers brushed mine. He didn't pull away quickly. "Tell me," he said, settling into the chair across from me. "What do you like? I mean really like. Not just food. Anything." I laughed, not knowing how to answer. "You sound like you're trying to impress someone." "Maybe I am," he said, his tone quieter now. "Maybe I want to know the things that make you happy." The wine warmed me, but it wasn't the alcohol that made me dizzy. It was the way he leaned in as I spoke. How his eyes studied my mouth when I laughed. How his hand rested on the table, just close enough to touch, as though waiting for my permission. His gaze lingered longer each time our eyes met, and when I looked away, I could still feel it, like a gentle weight on my skin. That night, I stood at the mirror, brushing out my hair, when I saw him walk past my bedroom door. He didn't come in, but he paused, just for a second. His reflection met mine in the hallway mirror, and he smiled. Not the way sons smile at their mothers, but the way men smile at women they desire. Frightened me. Not because it was inappropriate. He wasn't my blood after all. But because I hadn't felt like a woman under someone's gaze in so long, I had forgotten how dangerous it could feel. How exhilarating. How lonely it made all the years before seem by comparison. I told myself it was just kindness, gratitude, faith, but deep down I knew better. I knew that the things we hadn't said were starting to fill the silence between us louder than words ever could. Rain that night. The kind of rain that seems to soak into the bones of the house, tapping at the windows like fingers that won't stop knocking. I was in the den, curled up on the couch with a blanket and a book I hadn't touched in months. I kept rereading the same page. My eyes were on the words, but my mind was somewhere else. Waiting. Ethan had been quiet all evening. Not distant, just thoughtful, as if something was winding itself tighter inside him. He had helped me clean the kitchen after dinner, but instead of the usual laughter and teasing, he moved with the silence of someone deep in his own storm. Then, without a word, he disappeared upstairs. I thought he had gone to bed, until I heard his footsteps again. He reappeared in the doorway, wearing a simple gray t-shirt and soft sweatpants, barefoot. His hair was still damp from the shower, slightly tousled. There was something raw about him in that moment, unarmored, younger, older, both at once. "You're still up," he said. "So are you." He stepped into the room slowly, as if deciding with each pace whether it was the right choice. "Can I sit with you?" I nodded, pulling my feet in. He sat at the far end of the couch at first, but after a few seconds, he shifted closer. The room was lit only by the soft amber glow of a reading lamp. The rain's rhythm filled the silence. We didn't speak. Instead, he handed me a folded throw blanket and tucked it around my legs. His hands lingered a moment longer than necessary, and when he leaned back into the couch, our shoulders touched. Not by accident. I could feel his breath slow beside me, and mine tried to match it, as though syncing with his was the only way to calm the sudden fluttering in my chest. "I've been thinking," he said finally, his voice barely more than a whisper, "about how strange it is to come back home and not feel like a child anymore. About how nothing here feels small like it used to. So, I still find myself looking to you for comfort. Like I used to. I didn't know what to say. So I told the truth. I still look to you too. But not in the same way I used to. He turned his head slowly. His eyes met mine, steady and searching. I know, he said. I see it. I swallowed hard. My fingers gripped the edge of the blanket, the air thick with something unspoken but undeniable. Sometimes, he continued, I wonder what people would think if they saw how close we are now. If they knew what I feel when I look at you. I turned my face away, my breath catching in my throat. You shouldn't say that. But it's true. I stood abruptly, not to leave but to breathe. I walked toward the window, the sound of rain pressing against the glass as I stared into the night, the reflections blurring in front of me. My heart thudded in my ears. Behind me, I heard the couch creak as he stood. You don't have to be afraid of me, he said. His voice low, patient, almost reverent. I'm not here to hurt you. I just need you to know. See you. As you are. As a woman. Not just the one who raised me. And I care about you in ways I don't think I'm supposed to. I turned to him. He was standing a few steps away, his hands loose at his sides, his expression open and vulnerable in a way that nearly undid me. And what do you expect me to do with that? I asked, my voice trembling. Nothing, he said. Unless you feel it too. I couldn't speak. I couldn't move. I could only stand there as he stepped closer, slowly, carefully, like someone approaching a frightened bird. He didn't touch me. He just looked into my eyes, his voice barely a breath. You deserve to be loved, he said. Not just taken care of. And I can't help it if I want to be the one who does it. In that moment, nothing was decided. No line was crossed. But in the quiet, in the storm that beat down outside, I felt something shift permanently between us. And I didn't stop it. The next morning was quieter than usual. Not awkward. Not strained. Just quiet. As though the house itself had taken a breath and was holding it. I lingered in bed longer than I meant to, eyes tracing the ceiling, remembering the way he had looked at me the night before. And the way I hadn't looked away. When I finally stepped into the kitchen, Ethan was already there. He didn't say good morning. He simply turned, smiled gently, and handed me a cup of coffee, perfectly made, just the way I liked it. His quiet attentiveness had always been a part of him, but now it felt different, intimate, intentional, as if every small act of care was its own declaration. Sleep okay? He asked. I nodded, though my sleep had been fractured by dreams I couldn't remember, only feel, dreams that left me breathless when I woke. He watched me for a moment, his expression unreadable. Then, with a soft clatter of dishes, he turned back to the stove. I thought we could do something today. Something nice. Like what? Don't worry. I'll handle it. And he did. By early afternoon, he had packed a bag with snacks, a bottle of chilled rose, and a blanket. We drove out to the edge of the old lake, the one he used to swim in as a teenager. I hadn't been there in years. The shore was quiet, just the two of us, the breeze playing gently across the water's surface. We laid the blanket out under the shade of a tall maple tree. For a while we said nothing. We just sat, sipping wine from paper cups, listening to the hush of the wind in the leaves, our knees nearly touching. I was painfully aware of how his gaze kept finding its way to me, lingering, thoughtful, always retreating just before I turned to meet it. You used to come here alone when things were hard, I said, breaking the silence. I always worried about you. I thought you might feel lost. I was, he replied simply. But not the way you think. I wasn't lost in the world. I was lost in what I wanted. What I couldn't have. He looked at me then, openly, directly. And now? I asked, though part of me didn't want to know. Now I know exactly what I want, he said. But I also know I don't have the right to reach for it. Not unless you let me. The air around us tightened, like the pause between two people leaning in and not yet touching. He didn't move closer, but he didn't have to. I could feel the weight of his feelings in the stillness between us. "I spent so many years being strong," I said quietly. "Raising you. Standing on my own. I learned to live without needing anything. Anyone. But now I don't know if that's strength anymore. Or fear." He reached over, not to pull me in, not to claim anything, but just to take my hand. His palm was warm, steady. "It's okay to need," he said. "It's okay to want something real. Even if it breaks every rule." We sat like that for a long time. His hand in mine, the wine warming our blood, the lake stretching out like a mirror of everything we couldn't yet say. It wasn't just the affection that scared me. It was the truth. That I wanted to lean my head on his shoulder. That I wanted to feel his arms around me, not as a son giving comfort, but as a man offering it. When we drove home, the silence in the car was thick with everything unsaid. And yet, it was the most honest silence I had ever shared with another person. That night, I found another box on my bed. This one smaller. Inside, a delicate silver necklace. A tiny charm in the shape of a leaf. Just like the ones that had fluttered around us at the lake. No note. No explanation. But none was needed. The message was clear. He saw me. Not as his mother. But as the woman I had almost forgotten how to be.